My name is Lynn Johnson. I'm chairman of the Orleans County Legislature, and again, it is our honor to welcome Senator Schumer to Orleans County.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. First, let me apologize for being so late. We were planning to land, as we usually do when we come here to Orleans County, at the Batavia Airport, but unfortunately, after we took off, a plane got a flat tire on the Batavia runway, so they closed it. We thought we might not be able to come, but we found the Pine Hill Airport. That was new. You know, I've been flying in and out of this county for 25 years. I never heard of the Pine Hill Airport, but our pilot found it. We circled for a while, landed, but they had a big enough runway for us. It's a propeller plane, it's not a jet. But they told us, the pilots told us it would be better if we drove back down to Batavia because they weren't sure taking off would work with all of us on the plane. So sorry we're so late. We're going to try to move along quickly here. But let me thank Lynn Johnson, the chair of our legislature, and in the towns of Ridgeway, Yates, and Shelby. We also are joined by people who are not speaking. Skip Draper, who's a legislator at large from West Orleans County. Jack Welch, the Chief Administrative Officer of Orleans County. We have Mike Sederi, the mayor of Medina. We have the Chief of Medina Police, Todd Draper. Bill Eck, a legislator from the town of Clarendon and Shelby. And Lieutenant Annabelle of the Albion Police. Thank you all for coming. And first, as you know, I visit every county every year. This is my 25th year as senator. I visited this county more than 25 times, but this is my 25th year to visit the county. And I want to thank the voters. I won re-election in November, and I'm the first New York senator ever to have 5 terms. So thank you, and I promise the people of Orleans County, of the Rochester, Finger Lakes area, and of Western New York, I will work just as hard in my 5th term as I did in my first 4 for you. We've done a lot of good things for this county over the years. And today we're here to talk about a very serious problem. With me are John Cardone, our Orleans County District Attorney, Paul Pettit, the Public Health Director of Genesee and Orleans County Health Departments. Not speaking, but also here is John Bennett. He's the CEO of the Genesee-Orleans County Council on Alcoholism and Substance Abuse. And what are we here to talk about? I've got to put my paper down somewhere with all these microphones. We're here to talk about one of the biggest problems we face in this area, running from in Western New York, in the Rochester, Finger Lakes area, and that is the scourge of fentanyl. Fentanyl is a deadly poison. It is 50 to 100 times more deadly than heroin. And it has caused devastation from one end of this country to the other. In fact, last year, over 106,000 people died of fentanyl overdoses, and young people, 18 to 35, the largest cause of death is now fentanyl overdoses, or overdoses from drugs, most of which is fentanyl. That's more than auto accidents, that's more than anything else. So I have, as you know, been fighting really hard this scourge, but now we have a new tool that's about to go into effect. If we can pass this legislation, that will help. But let me give you some statistics, okay? Orleans County we're here in Orleans County. It has seen the devastation fentanyl can have. Because of our great law enforcement people in this county, and we thank them all for their service, both on the police and sheriff and prosecution side. There have been several drug busts this year alone in this county, where law enforcement seized $9 million worth of illegal drugs, including over 100 fentanyl pills. But they're disguised as other drugs. Fentanyl can be added to heroin, to OxyContin, to methamphetamine. It makes it much more deadly. These evil drug dealers who prey on us, they tell these kids, oh, this is even a better high. Well, it is, but it's much more deadly as well. So we have to cut this off at the source. And here is the good news. The Fend Off Fentanyl Act, which I passed in the defense bill in the Senate, gives us real chance to go after these drugs. because we give the president emergency powers to stop the flow of fentanyl from overseas. Fentanyl doesn't start here in the United States. It comes from precursor drugs that are made in China. And these Chinese companies ship them to Mexico, where they're refined into fentanyl, and they cross our borders. The Chinese government knows about this and does nothing, or very little. The Mexican government knows about this and does nothing, or very little. So now, is something the matter with you?
My mic, I'm just having a little trouble with it.
Go ahead. No, you Channel 13's always very nice.
We're always trouble.
You're never trouble, and you ask good questions. Go ahead, we'll wait for you.
Go on ahead, you're doing fine. I will get this.
No, we'll wait for it, even though we're so late, and I am a little rushed, but I don't.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry. Did you miss the whole thing, or it just ran out?
No, just
Good.
that little bit.
Because we wouldn't want to start over, would we? Still rolling. Okay. So this bill gives the president power to go, as I said, the Chinese government knows about these companies that make the precursor fentanyl drugs and does nothing. The Mexican government knows about these gangs and others that take these drugs and make them into fentanyl and send them here and does nothing. But the new legislation, which has passed the Senate overwhelmingly and bipartisan, will stop this because it gives the president emergency powers to impose real tough economic sanctions on China and on Mexico unless they stop these drugs. For once, we can stop them at the source. Our law enforcement does a good job, but the fentanyl keeps coming. And the Fend Off Fentanyl Act will really bring a great deal of relief to this. So why am I here today? It's passed the Senate, but it was not in the House. It passed the Senate in what we call a must-pass bill, the Defense Authorization Bill, the bill that pays for our soldiers and our military, NDAA it's called. And I, as majority leader, used my clout as majority leader to get this Fend Off Fentanyl bill into the defense bill, and it passed. It passed the Senate last week. So we must get the House to do the same thing and add it when we have a conference on the defense bill and get it done by September. We're now at a breakthrough moment in the fentanyl, in the fentanyl crisis. Drug traffickers, as I said, are killing people in Orleans County, in Buffalo, in Rochester, using these overseas drugs, but we finally have a real chance to cut it off at its source. The bill was bipartisan. It was drafted by Sherrod Brown, a Democrat, and Tim Scott, a Republican, one of Ohio, one of South Carolina. And I put it in the defense bill, helped them refine it, and help them get it done. So we now need to finish the job to stop this deadly flow of this awful, awful drug. If the House heeds our call, we can fight deadly fentanyl with something tougher, the declaration of a national emergency which allows the president to impose sanctions on China, on Mexico, and any other countries that are doing this and sending this fentanyl to us. And so we're fighting to do this. And one more thing I want to mention, because I've talked in Western New York and upstate about this, and that is about progress we have been making in a fight against another terrible drug called Xylazine. You're familiar with that, I presume. Xylazine is a skin-rotting drug. It's known on the streets as Trank. It's been spreading in upstate New York. It's been spreading in the nation. It's been found in drugs seized in cases in Orleans and Genesee County beginning in 2019. And finally, the ONDCP of Narcotic and Drug Control has designated Xylazine as a threat to the United States, and we passed, under my leadership in the Senate, the Trank Research Act, which directs the National Institute of Standards to take steps to get rid of Xylazine. Xylazine can be used, it's used by some anesthesiologists, veterinarians, as a tranquilizer for large animals, horses and cattle, beef, dairy cows, when they do, operations and stuff on them. But we have to find a way to prevent that from flowing into the hands of drug dealers, and this new act will help do that as well. So we've made some real progress in that area as well. So, we have to protect our country and our kids from these horrible drugs. They're getting deadlier and deadlier. They're causing more and more deaths and problems. It's a big problem for our police officers who, you know, can be exposed to fentanyl when they go on drug raids and other kinds of things. So it's everybody wants to get rid of this stuff, and this act has a real chance of doing it. Now I'd like to call on District Attorney Joe Cardone, who does a great job, to share remarks on what the county's doing about it. D.A. Cardone.
Senator, thank you very much, and thank you very much for highlighting this issue. There's no question that opiates and the problem we're having with fentanyl is the greatest crisis, in my judgment, that we have in this country. Since 1990, over 1.75 million people have died from the overdose of these two drugs. That's more people than have died in all the wars this country has ever fought, to put things in perspective. It's more people than have died from COVID. So this is a major crisis, and frankly, it's compromising the future of this country, having killed so many youths. There's not a gram of these drugs that are produced in the United States, not a gram, but it's in every community in this country and causing deaths on a daily basis in every community in this country. A few years ago, they came out with Narcan, which will overcome some of the effects and save some lives with respect to those that are overdosing on opiate drugs. Despite that, the numbers of deaths continue to go up. And the drug that the Senator spoke of Xylazine, actually Narcan doesn't even help with. Law enforcement has been dealing with this issue for a lot of years now, but frankly, on the local level, it's impossible to defeat this problem. We're just putting our fingers in a dam that is burgeoning and about to explode. The only way that this problem can be fought effectively is on a federal level by stopping the flow of these drugs into our country. I applaud the efforts of the Senator in doing that, and let's hope it works, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, I just want to say our local law enforcement folks should understand this. Does a great job, but it keeps flowing from over our borders. Mr. Cardone does not have jurisdiction in Mexico and China or even in other states when it flows through here. So we need a federal effort.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. And now we have Paul Pettit. He's the Public Health Director not only for Orleans County, where we are, but Genesee County, where we were supposed to land.
Yes, thank you, Senator Schumer, for being here. Appreciate that, and choosing Orleans County to deliver this message. The opioid epidemic is an urgent public health and public safety issue here in Genesee and Orleans County and around the country. Drug overdose deaths are now the leading cause of injury mortality in the United States. In 2021, 106,000 individuals died from drug overdoses in the U.S. 70,000 of those individuals died of synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl. That's over 70% of all drug overdose deaths that year due to fentanyl and other synthetic drugs. Locally in Genesee and Orleans County, we have seen similar trends. Since 2019, we've had 53 overdose deaths in Genesee County and 23 overdose deaths in Orleans County. 64 of those 76 deaths, or 84%, have involved fentanyl. Stopping fentanyl where it comes from is a major part of our work. But we need to focus also on helping those currently struggling with opioid use disorder. Like many areas around the country, we have an opioid task force here in Genesee, Orleans, Wyoming counties that works on these issues on a daily basis. Genesee, Orleans, in Orleans and Wyoming counties, our task force has been working over the last 6 years to address this issue. Pre-pandemic, we've had over 400 individuals representing a cross-section of agencies, including public health, mental health, law enforcement, substance use agencies, the faith-based community, and others that have been meeting regularly to address this epidemic in our communities. This dedicated work group is focused on education, data collection, working on access to naloxone, access to care, and other types of focus areas that are hoping to move the needle in a positive direction in our communities. There's a lot of work to be done. A comprehensive approach that involves not only stopping the drugs where they're coming from at the border is extremely important to helping us get where we need to be, but also continuing to work with those in our communities that are struggling with substance use disorder, making sure they have the resources and the ability to get the help that they need. So again, I thank you, Senator Schumer, for being here. Thank you for championing this cause and continuing to support all the efforts that we have underway in our community and communities around New York State to address this epidemic.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pettit, do you want to say anything else, Chair? Okay, we'll take questions on this subject first. Yes.
Hi, Isabel Garcia with News 8. In talking about, the fact that it's already been deemed, an emerging threat, and obviously this is, legislation is aiming to cut it off at the source. In terms of the fact that it's already, been permeating into, the region, and for treatment, in terms of testing, what's being done?
Yes, we're talking about the bill we passed, but in last year's budget and in last year's gun safety bill, we actually passed a good amount, a new amount of money for treatment. People said, when we had the problem in Buffalo with the shooting, and obviously we want to do something about guns, but a lot of people said it's a mental health problem as well, and it was. So we got $14 billion for drug treatment and mental health related to PTSD and to opioid treatment. And that is now becoming available for our localities and this is very important, for community groups that do drug treatment can apply directly. About half the money goes to the state and it goes distributed to the counties, but half the money goes to people who can apply, groups who can apply. So we're looking, you got to do both. You got to stop the flow and help law enforcement, but you also got to treat people who need the help.
And just as a quick follow-up to that too, knowing that the drugs are already permeating into the streets, to get a snapshot of exactly how widespread it is there any type of investment that will come with this or anything?
Yeah, there's a lot of, no, we are doing, the Office of Drug Control is doing lots of studies about how to stop the flow. We have a HIDA here, a High Intense Drug Treatment Association, which our counties work with, where the federal government will inform local law enforcement of new shipments of different types of drugs that are coming so they know what's here and what's coming. So we're really fighting this. Methamphetamine was a huge problem. We fought that pretty tough, and now it's declined. We have to do the same with fentanyl, which is more deadly than anything we've seen.
Senator, what
Yes.
kind of tools would the emergency powers?
Well, the biggest thing it can do is impose, we can't send our police officers, sheriffs into China or Mexico. But if we tell the government we're putting tough sanctions on them economically, which is going to hurt them, they will act. This has proven to work in the past. So the best tool is that. But there are other tools that are in this bill as well.
Can you give an example of when it's proven to work in the past? I think it's similar to what you did with steel, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. We did sanctions on companies that were dumping steel, and they didn't. And now some of our steel companies, including Nucor here in upstate New York, and Crucible, and many others, are doing much better.
Senator, is this in line with the Biden administration's foreign policy? Because we hear comments from Secretary of State Blinken, quote, agreed to explore a joint effort to stem the spread of chemicals used to make fentanyl in discussions with China. And then Alejandro Mayorkas, the Homeland
Yes.
Security Secretary, he says we'll be discussing with them hopefully some space to address with our Chinese counterparts the scourge of fentanyl. So it sounds like you want a harder line
Yes.
of sanctions.
I do.
But the Biden administration is still negotiating.
Okay. Look, talking to the Chinese, talking to the Mexican government can't hurt. But it's not enough. We have to be much tougher, and we've talked to them for too long. I will say this. We put this legislation together in the Senate, but the Biden administration is supporting it. And I will do everything I can once it becomes law to make sure they use these sanctions, not just talk. It's a good question.
The House would not agree.
I don't, look, if, you never know who trades off what for what. But I want to make sure, this is so important, I want to make sure it was bipartisan. This is, thank God, not an issue, where the partisan divisions are there. But I want to make sure it happens. And the best way to do that is spread the word. And our upstate New York delegation can be very helpful in that regard. They're bipartisan as well.
Can we hear more about the recent drug busts in Orleans County specifically?
Sure.
Mr. Cardone.
So we had a two-year investigation that initiated in Orleans County. It spread to other counties. It involved not only Orleans County, but other law enforcement agencies, including the DEA and also the New York State Attorney General's office. It resulted in numerous arrests in Western New York, and you heard the results. We recently had one of our defendants was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison as a result of it. So it was a far-reaching investigation, and we got a number of drugs off the street, including drugs like the senator referred to, that actually they're stamped as a different type of drug, but were fentanyl and extremely lethal. So it was very successful.
And the cooperation between the federal government and the sheriffs and the county and the state and the local governments is very important and has improved things a lot, as I'm sure our DA could tell you. They didn't used to have that cooperation. The feds would do its thing, the states would do their thing, locales. It's much better to coordinate it all.
Senator, what about Mexico, too? Because I seem to recall a quote from the Mexican president, "You want fentanyl.
Yeah.
It's not our problem."
Mexico, the Mexican president has been uncooperative at this, and I think even the Biden administration would agree with that, and that's why these sanctions are going to be needed.
Would they apply?
Yes, it applies to Mexico and to China, and any other country too, but it's aimed at two countries, China, which makes the precursor drugs, and then Mexico, which allows them to be, does nothing. The government's not doing it itself, but they do nothing to stop these gangs and others from sending it in here.
Have you been able to figure what types of sanctions work better than others?
Yeah, you go for the economic people know this. There are areas where sanctions really hurt these countries because they depend on, workers in their countries making this stuff and exporting other things to I'm not talking drugs, so let me say that again. I got a little unclear. There are lots of products that these countries make that are legitimate, that their economies and their workers depend on. You put sanctions in and say they can't send them here, or there's a huge high tariff if they do send them in here, and it sends a real message. It's worked in the past on steel, on aluminum, on other things when they were dumping things. Okay? Any others on this subject?
Yeah. Off topic.
We'll go to off topic in a minute. Okay, off topic, red shirt. That was a minute. I'm trying to get to. Yeah. Go ahead.
You've been a really big supporter of the stamp park down the road in
Yes,
County
yes.
for years, as a way of kind of really boosting that regional economy. There's some concern from some folks here in Orleans County that the infrastructure that stamp needs would actually harm the economy
Pipeline.
here,
Yeah.
including into Lake Ontario and the tourism economy. I'm wondering couple of things. One, have you been made aware of this? And two, how do you think this?
I was just made aware of it. I hear there's a dispute between Genesee County and Orleans County, so maybe Mr. Pettit, no, since he represents both. I don't mean to put you on the spot. But it's a problem that I think the two counties have to get together and work out among themselves. Look, the stamp plant, let's face that, which is, we just got Edwards, one of the leading packaging of chips to go there. It's an English company. It's a leading company in the world. They're going to employ over 600 people at Stamp. Plug Power has its green hydrogen facility there. It can help make the Rochester Finger Lakes area one of the centers of the country in green hydrogen, which is a future. These are good-paying jobs. For years, I've worked for good-paying jobs. So it's important, but it's also important to make sure, as it goes through Orleans County, that it doesn't do too much damage. I would just hope the counties could come together. Okay? Yes, sir.
Senator, the governor has said that she's on the phone with the White House every day about the asylum seekers that are in New York State right now, but no developments at this point. We've heard from New York City that they need some $3 billion more to pay for this.
Right.
We've heard from numerous lawmakers that said, can we expedite the job processing?
Yeah.
What needs to be done at
Well,
the
first,
federal level, and what
yeah, we fought to get in last year's budget over $100 million so that the taxpayers of New York, upstate and down, wouldn't be burdened. We're fighting to get a lot more money of that now. And, we're looking at everything that can be done. Ultimately, we need some kind of answer at the border, and the real answer is bipartisanship. You're never going to do it with one party or the other, and we're working to get a bipartisan proposal on that as well.
Is it something that needs to happen legislatively or at the administrative?
It's mainly, some of this is administrative, but the bipartisan ways to deal with the border would be legislative, and we're working on that.
Senator, one more border question.
Yes.
Obviously, with bridge crossings.
Yes.
Congressman Higgins, well, you know where I'm going.
Yeah, well, you're right.
With the staff vacancy, not vacancies, but the deployment, redeployment.
It's yes.
Of some of the CBD officers.
It's a great point, Ron. So I got more money in the budget for Border Patrol and for Customs because of the problems that we have. But it was never intended, that money was to augment what happened on the southern border. That money should have been used to help at the southern border, but they should not be taking away personnel from the northern border to rob Peter to pay Paul. And I am now working and pushing both Customs and Border Patrol to restore people they've removed from the northern border, particularly in the Buffalo corridor, which is the second biggest after Detroit in the country. So the waits, which have been hours, stop. They tried this a few years ago, you remember? I went after them. I got the people restored. I'm going to do it again.
Do you think Alejandro Mayorkas listens, though? Because we interviewed Congressman Higgins yesterday. He was at that congressional meeting. Maybe you were part of that.
I was there, yes.
He said they said the right words, but actions will speak.
Well, you know, as the majority leader, I have a lot to say as to what goes on the floor of the Senate. They all want things on the floor of the Senate, and I'm going to use my clout to make them do what they have to do as opposed to just verbiage. Okay, thanks. Last off topic.
You wrote a letter a while back to Norfolk Southern about running trains down
Yes.
to County.
Yeah.
Have you heard back from them?
Yeah, we are pushing them very hard. What's happened here, so people know, is Norfolk Southern parks their trains and does all kinds of work on their trains in Chautauqua County, I think in Ripley and one other town, Westfield. And they block off people's road. There's one road they block off, there's no way to get out, and the people are stuck in their houses or can't get to their houses for hours and hours and hours on end. So I am, right now, we've sent a letter to Norfolk Southern, Channel 7, if that's you. Channel 7 alerted us to that fact, and we'll stay on them until they change. I've had this problem in the Hudson Valley in the past, and when I went after them, they stopped. So we're going to do that again.
So as of today, you haven't heard back from them?
We have heard that they've gotten our letter and they're going to try to work out a solution, but we're waiting to get the solution. Thank you, everybody. No, I think.
You got Rochester and Buffalo here. Any regional tech updates?
Yes. Okay. Sorry. We are working really hard to make Rochester and Buffalo one of the tech hubs. I passed in the CHIPS and Science bill, which helped bring so much chip manufacturing to upstate New York. But we passed that there should be tech hubs in areas that hadn't specialized in tech, not New York City, San Francisco, Boston. And Rochester and Buffalo are getting together and putting in a combined application. There will be 5 or 6 tech hubs granted in the country. I'm working really hard, and I'm very hopeful that Rochester, Buffalo will be one of them. Okay? Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you, as always.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to run quickly and not say goodbye to everyone because we're very late.